What's up, guys? Today I would like to cover many things, so let me try to be brief as possible for each and every one of them. And let's start with the price action. As you see on the daily time frame, we have several green days, and just this one started to be red at the moment, but in fact this looks a little bit exhausted, and we were talking about the fact that it seems to be too fast of the growth with a little of the consolidation over here. So I would expect still the price to return to the zone of $10,000 as we discussed yesterday. Although of course it may not happen because, you know, this is crypto and bullishness sometimes could be really crazy. At the same time, if we look at the indicators, then MACD is showing the bullish crossover right now. If you remember, we were drawing some trend line on the lows of daily MACD, something like that. And at this point, it seemed to be that it had a chance to return to the bullish territory, but instead of that we had a new lower low. But finally, because of this correction was much more extensive than the previous ones, we had this low in the negative territory, but eventually this is the bullish crossover, much more significant and much more convincing than the previous ones. At the same time, RSI is seemingly finding the support, so those two seem to show a little bit of the hope for the bullish scenario, although of course we could return again a little bit lower in order to cool down a little bit, to gain some strength and consolidate a little bit more after such a rise. Also, another thing which I was going to mention is that you remember we were looking at the multiplicative moving averages, and if we look at the BLX chart, then you would see how nicely those moving averages showed previous highs at the every cycle pretty much, starting at this one, for example, in 2013, and then this one is the second moving average, and we had a third one with a third moving average over here. So you may expect that the next one will be somewhere around the fourth moving average, and also every high is pointed out by the intersection of the green moving average with 111 days moving average here, with the accuracy of like 2-3 days, and here as well, and here the same thing. So it is indeed really powerful indicator, and right now what we can see is that the price is actually tried to test this moving average once again here and here. After it was the resistance at this area, it became a support, and we seem to be finding this support with the price, and it has a pullback from this moving average to the upside. Keep in mind that the second one is at around $12,000. It would be nice to break it and hold above this moving average in order to perform the new rising cycle. So we'll see. So far, again, this is another support which we can look at. By the way, globally, I would like to share with you the data from Willy Woo. He published his another research on the mining difficulty of Bitcoin with respect to the price. On a global time scale, you see every time when the mining becomes more difficult, and these are just moving averages of the difficulty of the mining for different time frames, you see 200 days and so on. So every time when it becomes flatter, so the difficulty becomes harder and harder, the price is going lower, and it often shows the low of each and every cycle. And it makes sense because the lower the price, the less number of miners are able to mine in profits, and then the more of them have to cut their mining, so only the most profitable will remain. So among those profitable miners, the less number of miners will sell all of their bitcoins. In that way, the supply of bitcoin in all of such stages will become lower and lower, bringing a positive impact to supply-demand ratio, which turns the price going to the upside. So kudos to Willy Woo, once again, one more nice job. And in fact, these days there's a lot of the fundamental things are happening, or you may say that not fundamental but news-related things. So you remember Ledger X was about to launch physical Bitcoin futures with approval from CFTC, and recently CoinDesk wrote this article saying that it's actually not approved from CFTC. There's a lot of controversy around that, and the main takeaway that it's probably not resolved yet, although the Bitcoin futures will be probably launched. It's not clear about the fact that it will be physical Bitcoin futures or with fiat delivery. But as you can see, it was July 31st, and at the same time the price didn't react in a negative way, so maybe it's a kind of attempt to let people sell. Of course, if you fall into the conspiracy theories that news are made with the purpose of manipulating the market. More interesting part of the news is that, as you can see from the Forbes article, United States lawmakers are realizing they can't ban Bitcoin. So it was a hearing of the United States Senate Committee on Banking, Houses and Urban Affairs, and during that hearing, Chairman Mike Crapo, if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, shared his belief that the United States would not be able to succeed in banning Bitcoin. This is a very strong statement. I mean, previously they were saying like, okay, we in principle can do anything. This is our country. We write laws and everything. He is saying, if the United States were to decide, and I'm not saying that it should, so if the United States were to decide we don't want cryptocurrency to happen in the United States and try to ban it, I'm pretty confident we couldn't succeed in doing that because this is a global innovation. So this is pretty strong, guys. Of course, again, it's just a piece of news, but it's kind of a signal for huge players, huge investors out there that this is a global thing. Even United States, as a global economy, the biggest economy in the world, has to deal with it and cannot do anything with that, even in their own country. And you see how the trend in such narrative is changing over time. Now it's more and more bullish. Another thing is that, as we all know, United States Federal Reserve is cutting the rate for the first time since the global financial crisis 10 years ago. And in principle, a lot of people are saying that since this is bring another inflation wave to the United States currency, it is good for Bitcoin because Bitcoin doesn't have such an inflation as probably like all of the currencies. In that way, Bitcoin is a kind of a hedge for investors to prevent losses from all the other possible assets which you can find on the market. And again, this is another brick in the wall of the strength of Bitcoin in the long term, another signal for huge investors, institutions that, guys, this is the thing which you shall pay attention to. Now, speaking about the way of seeing the global trends from the crypto analytics, Philip recently, well, maybe like more than a week ago, posted this chart when he was saying that, okay, it's probably a new accumulation zone from this high, and after this accumulation zone we'll see the new rise, and he drew this trend line, well, not a trend line, but kind of the huge correction envelope function for the price action which we look at. And then he said maybe in beginning of 2020 we will see new, or in the middle of 2020 we will see new all-time high. This is a pretty cautious analysis, and although he is saying that we may return to something like $7,000, which is rather classical approach, but still, even with this idea, we can see that the long-term scenario is really bullish, and already in the next year, in the middle of 2020, we will see a new all-time high above 20k. But at the same time, there are other analysts, for example, Alessio Rastani, commenting this chart and this analysis, saying that in addition to the fact that a lot of the people are expecting to see the new growth in the price of Bitcoin, at least above the local high of $14,000, at least from the correction which we currently observe. But eventually, in addition to the scenario which he shared some time ago about the possible move to the downside, turn to the lower low, because currently we see the B and maybe beginning of the C wave of major A, B, C correction, as he was saying in one of his bearish scenarios for the global price action of Bitcoin. He was proposing another way, that instead of Bitcoin going up after the end of this correction, maybe with returning to something like $8,000, or at least one of the key moving averages. So instead of moving directly up to the new local high, maybe above $14,000, Bitcoin will actually have another leg of the correction to even a lower part, which nobody kind of expecting, because the majority of people out there are seeing that picture in the way that we will end this correction and will continue to rise. So instead of that, he's proposing his wild card scenario where Bitcoin will actually return to the even lower low after this test, and maybe after that it will make a new rise. So it's really possible, but again, it's just one of the scenarios. I would love to see how the price action will look like, and maybe at that time we can see whether there is any chance to see such a evolution or not. And I would like to end this with a chart from Excavo on TradingView. From yesterday chart, you remember I was mentioning the fact that the price is actually moving much higher as soon as it breaks the previous high of the cycle. And on this chart it's something really similar, but in addition to that, Excavo actually added the halving events over here, and you see they are actually quite of the match for those point of time when the price is moving much higher, I mean with much higher slope than previously. So this was here. Very soon after that we see the significant boost of the price rise. This was here again. Very soon after that we see the increase in price with a faster speed. And the next one is over here. So his proposal is that somewhere after that we'll see some kind of this price action. Well, I guess he just took it from the previous cycle. And I think this is again quite of the conservative scenario. And even by this conservative scenario, we'll see something like, I don't know, $300,000, $500,000 even in 2021. But taking into account the speed of the price evolution at the moment and the bullishness and fundamental developments which is happening right now, maybe this will be much faster, and the halving event will be actually another fuel on the already existing accelerated rise of Bitcoin, something like here or maybe even here. I'm not sure, nobody knows, but still, my point is, even in this kind of conservative and relatively calm scenario, you see that we have a bullish picture in the very short term. Again, relatively because it's 2 years from now, but it's still, even from that point, it's like 30 to 50x only on Bitcoin. I don't know what will happen with altcoins at the same time. Okay guys, that is it for today. Let's see how the price will behave in the next days. I still would hope that it will touch my BitMax position for the long entry at around $10,166 something, and at that point we can start to make a new rise to the new high at above $14,000. With that said, I hope that the current episode was useful, and thank you for watching.